Dimensions of the Daf with Rabbi Mordechai Becher on JBS is made possible in part by the B.L. Manger Foundation in memory of Ben Manger.
Hi, I am Mordechai Becher. Welcome to Dimensions of the Daf with the Jewish Broadcasting Service, in which we cover different topics based on the Talmud and the wisdom of the Talmud. Every week is a different topic. No continuity is required, but it would be awesome if you'd watch. A shout out to people. I just spoke in Ottawa via Zoom, and there are a couple of people there who watch me on Jewish Broadcasting Service. So that's always nice to get that. Anyway, today's topic is protest, something which has been happening a lot in the United States and around the world recently. Protests, riots, all manner of demonstrations, riots, mobs, protests, depending on what you call them. It probably depends on which media outlet you're looking at. But how does Judaism view protest? So let me begin, first of all, with a statement from Jeremiah. Jeremiah the prophet lived at the time of the destruction of the first temple. And after the temple was destroyed, the Jews who had been in Israel for over 1,200 years are now in exile in Babylon. So we're in Babylon, and we're now under a foreign government in a foreign country, a government which had been hostile, destroyed the temple, exiled the Jews, but a government that, on the whole, we were living under relatively peacefully. And Jeremiah tells the Jews there a very important thing. He says this. He says this in Jeremiah 29. He says, Dirshu et shlom ha'ir, asher iglesi eschem shama. You should seek the peace of the city to which you have been exiled. V'yispallu ba'ada el Hashem, and pray for it to God. Ki bishloma yelachem shalom, because if it's peaceful, you will have peace. Jeremiah tells the Jews, don't think that you are living independently of what's going on around you in this kingdom of Babylon. You should pray for the city in which you live. You should pray for the kingdom in which you live, because in its peace will be your peace. And indeed, if you look at the next screen, the next slide, we have Reb Chanina, Sgan HaKohanim. This is in Ethics of the Fathers. Having mispalel b'shloma shel malchus, pray for the peace of the kingdom. She'il male mora'ah, if not for its fear, ish esre'ehu chayim b'lo, people would swallow each other alive. We are not fans of anarchy. We prefer a government, even if it's a lousy government, we might prefer it. In fact, we definitely prefer it to no government. In a situation of anarchy, when there is no law and order, there is no law enforcement, there is no fear of punishment, there is no government, people will be eating each other alive like fish in the sea. As the Talmud says, Tractate Avodah Zarah, which is a tractate that deals with relationships with idolaters and pagans and so on and so forth, Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel. What does it mean when it says in the verse that man was made like fish of the sea? He says, you know what it's like? In the case of the fish of the sea, the larger fish eat the smaller fish. You know, the tuna eat the herring, and the orca eat the tuna, and so on. Actually, there's nothing eating orcas, I don't think. But in any case, it says, just as fish in the sea, everyone is the one who is larger, more powerful than the other will eat that one. So also human beings. If not for the fear of the kingdom, meaning if not for the government, someone's more powerful than you physically, someone's more powerful than you financially, someone's more powerful than you in other ways, that's it. The nature of people is they'll do really bad things to get ahead in life. They'll do horrific crimes and they'll trample over other people. So we need organized society. We need a government. I think it was Thomas Hobbes in Leviathan who said that without this type of social contract, he put it very eloquently, if I remember correctly, he put it, life would be nasty, brutish, solitary, and short. If you don't have a social contract, you don't have a government, you don't have that type of society, then life will be nasty, brutish, solitary, and short. And so, and there's no question that's true. And he says, and he goes on to say that this is one of the reasons that Reb Chanina said to pray for the peace of the kingdom. And we actually know that it has been Jewish custom. We can verify it at least since about the 13th century, to say a prayer for the government. And I think there's actually even evidence of earlier prayers than that. But we have prayers for the government in which we live, which we pray for. So yes, it may be a bad government sometimes, and we have had experience with some really bad governments. But and obviously there are limitations. You know, we're not going to pray for the Nazis, but we would pray for a government which is a incompetent or not a good government, unfair, etc. Because better a bad government than no government at all, because of the anarchy which would take place. And that is really very fascinating. So before we even get into protest, we have to understand that protest, yes, but anarchy, no. So it's legitimate protest, which we'll see very soon, is something which Judaism condones and maybe even obligates us to do. But there's a difference between legitimate protest and the destruction of the organs of government, the destruction of law enforcement, and the law and order being replaced by complete anarchy and what we call hefker, meaning no one's in charge, no one does anything. Now, what about protest? So I think this might be what I'm going to read to you next, which is from the Talmud, as you see on the screen. Rosh Hashanah 19a is possibly the earliest protest, at least the earliest protest that I know of. So it says the following. On the 28th of Adar, 28th of Adar is a minor festival. There was a book called Megillas Tanis, which means the scroll of fasting. It was actually a scroll that contained within it fast days and festivals throughout the entire Jewish year. And we don't actually have that anymore. We don't observe most of them. We have still 5 fast days, Tisha B'Av, Shiva Sabbat Tammuz, etc. We have all the festivals that you are familiar with, Purim and Hanukkah and so on and so forth. But there was a whole range of, let's say, minor festivals and minor fast days that we no longer observe. And, you know, we have a very rich history. We have a history which lots of ups and downs. And so we had many things to observe, to commemorate, to mourn, to celebrate, etc., etc. So one of those days was the 28th of Adar, in which basically it says that good news arrived in Israel for the Jews, that the evil kingdom, who was that? That was Rome, who controlled Israel at the time, that the ruling came that the Jews did not have to turn away from the Torah. We were free to observe Judaism. Interesting. Now, and then it gives the backstory here. So we have a decree, an edict that is promulgated by the Roman government that the Jews are allowed to keep Judaism. What's the background? So listen to what it says. For the wicked kingdom, Rome, issued a decree against Israel that they should not occupy themselves with Torah study. Jews would not be allowed to study Judaism. They should not circumcise their sons, and that they should desecrate Shabbat. And we have experienced many, many times Soviet Union under communist Russia, you know, teaching children Torah was actually illegal. I don't know about circumcision, but there are plenty of countries that ban circumcision. Obligating Jews to desecrate Shabbat in Soviet Union, yes, you were not allowed to observe Shabbat. So under the Romans, this was a decree that was issued. And I should just point out, in parentheses here, it was not always bad. The Romans very often had tolerance for Judaism. The Romans, there are a lot of times, in fact, for a lot of history, I don't know if it's the majority, but the Senate made accommodations for the Jewish people to observe Judaism. There were times that we were not obligated to give a tax to the temple of Jupiter. We were allowed to send it to the Jewish leadership in the land of Israel. When bread was distributed in Rome, if it was distributed on a Jewish festival, the Jews were allowed to pick it up on a different day. So it's type of interesting that we had this we were considered a legitimate religion. So we did have various freedoms under Rome, but not always. Depends on the emperor. So anyway, apparently this emperor had issued an edict that the Jews could not circumcise their sons, they could not learn Torah, they could not keep the Shabbat. So what did Yehuda ben Shammua and his colleagues, the leadership of the Jewish people, what did they do? They went to Rome and they took advice from a certain matron who all the prominent men of Rome would visit regularly, thinking that she would know how to annul the decree. In other words, there's this woman, she knew the leadership in Rome, she knew the senators, and therefore they took her advice. This is what she said. She said, Bo hafginu belayla, go out and protest at night. Hafginu is the Hebrew word for even in modern Hebrew, that's the word for protest. She said, go out and protest at night. So they went out and they protested at night. Why at night? Because they knew all the senators would be at home. So they went to a place where they knew a lot of the Roman senators lived, a wealthy neighborhood probably. And they said, woe unto heaven. Lo acheichem anachnu, are we not your brothers? Lo bnei av echad anachnu, are we not children of one father? Lo bnei em achat anachnu, are we not children of one mother? We're all humans. Jews are humans. Are we not your brothers? Do we not descend from the same mother and father? Man ishtanenu mikol umav v'loshem, why are we treated differently from every nation and every language? Shatem gozrin aleinu gzerot kashot, you make these harsh decrees upon us. And amazingly, the Senate annulled the decree. And the day of the annulment of those anti-Jewish decrees was the 28th of Adar, which was made into a minor festival. So here it's fascinating. We have the Jews protesting a harsh and anti-Semitic decree given by the Roman government. So these same rabbis prayed for the Roman government. These same rabbis felt that anarchy was not a good thing, but that did not prevent them from engaging in legitimate protest against the Roman government's policies. So we have to have a balance. On the one hand, we don't want anarchy. We don't want people not being able to walk in the streets. We don't want destruction of property. We don't want no law and order. We don't want life to be nasty, brutish, solitary, and short. On the other hand, we don't automatically accept every decree as being, okay, government said it, end of story. No, here the rabbis protested, and they protested. If actually it was effective, and this protest was effective. And it's interesting, the Talmud, it goes even further. The Talmud says, Gemara in the next screen, Shabbos 119b, it says the following. One of the Gemara has a lot of discussion about what were the sins that caused the destruction of the temple. Our obligation is, when some tragedy happens, we're supposed to engage in introspection and to try to figure out, what did we do wrong? Yes, other people came and destroyed the temple, but ultimately we feel that we need to react to this by looking into ourselves and seeing where we can improve. And hence, there's a lot of literature in the Talmud trying to figure out, what is it that we did wrong in the destruction of the temple? Where did we go wrong? And here the Gemara says the following. Rav Amram, son of Rav Shimon bar Abba, and Rav Shimon bar Abba said, Rav Chanina said, Jerusalem was destroyed only because the people did not rebuke one another. As it says, her ministers were like stags that found no pasture. They walked without strength before their pursuer. Like a deer, antelope, etc., which is being pursued by a hunter. It doesn't stand up and fight. It just runs. So he says the ministers, the leaders of the Jewish people, displayed cowardice. There were people who were doing the wrong things. They didn't protest. They didn't rebuke one another. Just as one stag turns its head towards the other's tail when it grazes, each one feeds on its own, so too the Jewish people in that generation lowered their faces to the ground and did not rebuke one another. So yeah, if there was evil going on, which there was, those who are not doing that evil should have protested. And it's interesting, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, he actually founded the Lubavitch or Chabad Hasidic movement. In his, he wrote a commentary, well, it's really a version of the Code of Jewish Law. In it, he points out, he says, rebuke is not only to improve the other person. That's one purpose of rebuke. But another purpose of rebuke is protest against evil. Even if I know that the person will not change their behavior as a result of what I'm saying, there's still an obligation to say it in order to remove myself, to distance myself from wrongdoing. So there's two components to rebuke. Component number one is attempting to hopefully help the other person avoid sin and become a better person. That's true. That's number one. But there's another issue, which is just protest is an obligation in of itself, because if evil is happening and I'm not saying anything, to some degree, I'm part of that. If we have a look at the next Gemara, it's the Gemara in Soita 11a, it says something very interesting. It says that there were three noteworthy people consulted by Pharaoh. Pharaoh was trying to decide what to do with the Jews. There's a lot of Jews. I'm a little worried, so what should I do with them? So he had three consultants. One was Bilam. He turns up later in the Torah as a priest who cursed the Jewish people. And the next one is Job. There's a book of Job talking about the suffering of an apparently innocent person called Job. The Talmud does say that's a work of fiction, but not everyone agrees with that. Some say there actually was a person called Job. So obviously this Gemara seems to say there was a person called Job. He's one of the consultants. And the third is Yitra, Jethro, who, as you know, became father-in-law of Moses, converted to Judaism. His daughter became the wife of Moses, Zipporah, and he became the father-in-law of Moses. Now, it's interesting. Reb Chia bar Abba said the following. Bilam, he advised Pharaoh to kill all the Jewish firstborn sons, all the Jewish sons. Bilam was an evil man. We see later on he cursed the Jews. He said, you want to stop the Jews from being powerful, just kill all the men. We'll take the women. All the men, all the boys who are born we'll kill. The men who are alive we'll have as slaves. End of story. So what happened to him? He was killed in the war with Midian. As Torah says, Bilam ben Beor hargu lefi charev. Bilam, the son of Beor, was killed by the sword. Okay, he advocated murder. He was killed. Job, who was silent and neither advised nor protested, he was punished by suffering, as detailed in the book in the Bible named after Job. So what did Job suggest that Pharaoh should abuse the Jews? Did he suggest that Pharaoh should enslave or kill the Jews? No, he didn't suggest anything. Did he protest when Bilam said, kill them? There also, he didn't say anything. That's a problem. That's a big problem. Because what it means is that he was silent in the face of evil. So what happened to him? He suffered terribly. Yitra, Jethro, he ran away as a sign of protest. He says, I cannot be part of this government anymore. He ran away. So that means he was not part of the evil. By running away, because they would have killed him had he said anything, but by running away, at least he could show that he did not approve. So what happened to him? As we know, he was rewarded tremendously. He became the father-in-law of the greatest Jew, greatest person who ever lived, Moses. He had wonderful children, grandchildren, etc., became part of the Jewish people. He's rewarded. And so what's fascinating, and his descendants, the Canaanites, became part of the Jewish people later. And not only that, but the Canaanites lived in a place called Yavet, which is actually where the Sanhedrin, the Jewish Supreme Court, lived, was stationed for a while. So he had tremendous merit. So we have three people. One advises evil, advises to murder, advises Pharaoh to murder. He gets killed. Fitting punishment. Another one doesn't advise Pharaoh to murder, but he doesn't say anything against it. Doesn't protest. What happens to him? Terrible, terrible suffering. The third advisor protests by running away. and he is rewarded. So we see here the power of protest and the obligation to protest when there's evil. Now, sometimes protest would mean dying, and that Yitra did not do, because you don't always have to die for the sake of protest. But in this particular case, Yitra ran away and he was rewarded. Job did not protest. Now, there's another Gemara which actually tells something quite interesting, that it's not just your country or city that you are responsible towards. We will see that there's a responsibility towards everyone in the world. Let's have a look what it says. The Mishnah, it's interesting. There's a Mishnah that says, it's discussing, I have to give you a bit of background. What it's discussing is that animals, you're not allowed to have your animal work for you on Shabbat, on the Sabbath. Everyone's supposed to rest. So if I own an animal, it should not be carrying a burden for me. So, obviously my dog wants to run around carrying a tennis ball. That's fine, because that's his own benefit. My dog used to love his tennis ball. That's his own benefit. But if I would like my dog to carry around something for me, that's problematic. That's having my animal work for me on Shabbat. Now, the Mishnah says this. You're not. There was used to have a ribbon that would hang down between the horns of a cow as a sign that it was for sale for meat. I guess it was not giving milk anymore. It was not, whatever. It was a for sale sign. So the Mishnah says you're not allowed to have your cow go out with this for sale sign on it on the Shabbat. Why not? Because obviously it's not for the benefit of the cow, it's for your benefit. It's not like a flea collar, which is keeping fleas off the animal. That's the animal's benefit. Here it's a for sale sign. The cow's going to end up in McDonald's. That's not for the benefit of the cow. So you're not allowed to have it go out on Shabbos with that ribbon hanging between its horns. So listen to what the Mishnah says. The cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah used to go out on Shabbos, and it had the for sale sign, and the rabbis were not happy with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Very interesting. So the Mishnah is saying, this rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he did the wrong thing. His cow went out carrying this burden, and the rabbis objected. The rabbis were not happy with him. So now the Talmud tells me something fascinating. It says this, look, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was one of the wealthiest rabbis of his time. He had a huge cattle ranch. He used to give just tithes from his cattle numbered in the thousands. That means he had, it may be an exaggeration, but he definitely had thousands of head of cattle. He was a cattle magnate. So how could you refer to the cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? Right? You could say a cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. But to say the cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah sounds like, how many cows does he have? One, which is not true. It's ridiculous. He had thousands. So the Gemara says an amazing answer. This is what the Talmud says. It says, no, he indeed had thousands of cows. And the cow that we're referring to was not even his. It belonged to a neighbor. The neighbor let the cow go out on Shabbos with the for sale sign. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah could have objected and did not do so. And hence, for all eternity, for the past close to 1,800 years, the Mishnah has written Rabbi Elazar's cow went out against the wishes of the sages with a for sale sign. It wasn't even his, belonged to a neighbor. But the Talmud says because he didn't protest, he didn't object, it's considered like his. Now, the Gemara goes on to say, have a look in, anyone who has the capability to effectively protest the sinful conduct of the members of his family and did not do so, he is held liable for the sins of his family. If he's in a position to protest the sinful conduct of the people of his town and he fails to do so, he is liable for the entire town. If he is capable, if he's in a position to protest effectively the sins of an entire world and he fails to do so, he is held liable for the entire world. That's incredible. What that means is the following. And I don't think back then there were very many people who had the ability to communicate with it. In fact, I don't think anyone then had the ability to communicate with the whole world. Nowadays, we can communicate with the whole world. Here I am sitting in my virtual study, and I've got my camera and Zoom. I can communicate pretty much with anyone, virtually anyone on the planet can watch this. Okay, and Halavai JBS should be able to reach everyone on the planet. But my point is that we have the ability to impact thousands, millions. You know, you put a video on YouTube, you have a responsibility there, because all those people who watch it, it has an impact on them. So the Talmud says, if I've got the ability to communicate with my city, to protest meaningfully that they're doing something wrong and I don't do so, to some degree, I'm actually held liable for that sin. Just like Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah was held liable for the transgression of the Sabbath done by a neighbor, even though he didn't do it, but he didn't object. So the Talmud says that's true of your own family, you're liable for them. That's true of your own city, you're liable for them. That's true of the entire world. So the obligation to protest is pretty heavy, because what it means is if I know that there's an injustice going on, if I know there's a sin, I know there's something wrong going on, and I don't say anything about it, to some degree, I'm responsible. Now, it could be that I'm not, because no one would listen to me. That's quite possible. Most people don't listen to most other people. So most of us not necessarily in a position that we can have a meaningful protest. But if there's a group of us who can, if I'm able to, as an individual, say something, protesting something wrong, then it's an obligation. And if I don't do so, then I am held liable. So again, we have a beautiful balance in Jewish tradition. We have the balance between, on the one hand, our concern to have a government, our feeling that anarchy is not a good thing, and on the other hand, our understanding of the obligation to protest and the obligation, the moral obligation to remove myself from the sin, number one, to prevent it from happening, number two, and the fact that I'm held liable for anything that I could do, which I don't. And we also saw that despite our loyalty to the government, despite our patriotism and our prayers for Rome, nevertheless, we feel that if there's a decree which is unjust, if there's a decree which is wrong, which is discriminatory, etc., we go out and protest. And in fact, that first protest that I could find, there may be older protests, I don't know, but that early protest in the days of the Romans was actually effective in annulling a decree against the Jewish people. So that's it for me today. Thank you for watching Jewish Broadcasting Service, Dimensions of the Daf with me, Rabbi Mordechai Becher. If you'd like to get my book, The Written Bible of Becher, it is called Gateway to Judaism, and it's available at Amazon and other booksellers. So thank you very much for watching. Please give me a shout out if you see me. God willing, we'll see each other, in person. But thank you very much for watching. God bless. Stay safe and stay sane.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.